What's up YouTube? So I want to show you guys a very simple trick in Faceplant to make the ultimate kind of croaky psychedelic leads and synth sounds. So let's dive in and have a look. So there's a couple of tricks I want to outline in this video, but first and foremost I kind of want to start off with something simple. I'm sure we all know that kind of like psychedelic croaky sound, almost sounds like a sort of toad or something like that. So, you know, traditionally how we would do so is using a saw wave that's pitched down really low and putting a high pass filter on that. So we can start off just by doing it the sort of traditional way, but there's something special in Faceplant that I want to outline for you guys. I've kind of showed you in a previous video, but I think that example was a little bit extreme, so I didn't outline the kind of subtlety of it. But yeah, anyway, so let's do a pitched down saw wave with a high pass filter. Let's try pitch it down even more here. So the idea is to get it to the point where it's like almost no longer a pitch. It's kind of like a beating frequency. That's obviously represented by the shape of the waveform. So the different waveforms give you a much different kind of like tonal texture there, I guess. But I find for these kind of like croaky sounds, the saw wave sounds the best. It's kind of like clicky as opposed to more of a tone like these ones. The idea here to get the really kind of like throaty vocal texture out of this high pass filter is to use audio rate modulation. So here what we can do is we can add another oscillator. So I'm putting this below the out, so it's not actually sending any audio through the signal. We're merely going to use this one as a modulator signal. So what we can do here is we can click this little green plus icon and drag this cutoff up. So what this is doing is this is now modulating this cutoff at this shape at the speed of this oscillator. So you don't really notice too much difference at this point, but when you start to increase the harmonics over here, that's obviously the speed of this waveform. You can hear it creates that kind of like almost throaty kind of effect. And if we boost the Q up, it becomes a little bit more apparent. So obviously, depending on like the octave that you play in, it'll change the sound quite drastically. And then the harmonics makes quite a big difference here again. I generally like to stick to like 4, 8, or 16 with this type of thing. I think 8 sounded the best here. Cool, so if you play even like lower and lower, it almost becomes like a kind of rhythm. Okay, so I want to show you guys the difference here with the frequency, I guess it's frequency modulation of this filter. That's without, and then this is with. Find with this thing, it helps to put it onto one voice and put glide, but then leave this at 0, just so you don't get any of those overlapping notes. So what I want to do here is I want to create a little bit of a kind of stereo effect. So what we can do is we can use Haas and then stereo. And then create a bit of delay on here. That could be cool, I think. I want to put a slice EQ over here because it's very low frequency that this oscillator is playing. You'll see it's like really coming through on the low frequencies. So we can put a low cut there at like 250 or so. So we're just getting that kind of like croakiness coming through. The Haas was actually creating a weird sine kind of sound there, so I actually want to take that out. Just use the stereo alone. So that's pretty much it for the kind of like basic croaky sound. There's various ways we could go about, playing the sound. We could, for example, put in a random. And this is cool to put onto like the cutoff over here. Let's just set it to unipolar so it goes one way. Okay, so one more example with and without the frequency modulation. So it kind of adds that like almost like ring muddy kind of vocally texture to the filter. Very, very cool. Quite subtle, and I've noticed like with a lot of other examples, like filter effect plugins and stuff, it just doesn't have the same capabilities, and I believe it's because of sample rate and that kind of thing. But anyway, so I'm going to save this patch, Croak1, and then what I want to do is show you guys a couple of other really cool techniques to take this, a couple of steps further. So I actually just want to minimize these so I can see what's going on here. Maybe take off this modulation for now. So we could stack up some distortions, maybe like one before and one after the filter, and mix them and change the sort of distortion types, maybe one overdrive, one saturation, play with the mix and spread of each to create like more of a more texture and harmonics in the sound before filtering it and after filtering it as well. I'm just going to save that one as well. And then another technique, I actually want to just pull up the previous one because it's going to make things a little bit easier here. Another technique that's really cool to create, more variety on this kind of like croaky sound, or at least like a wider sound, is to duplicate the filter and the out module a couple of times, change this filter to like a different filter type, and set it to like a different lane. So here we've got a high pass in tandem with a band pass, and that's then sending to different lanes here. One thing that happens is when you duplicate the filters, the modulation doesn't apply, so we can just reapply that there. So we may want to go and turn the volume down a little bit. It might get a little bit loud here. Find with the band pass, I prefer the 1 times slope. That's cool. So we can do it again. Or there's another way of... so what's happening here is this high pass filter is then running into the band pass. But another trick that we can use to kind of stop that from happening is creating another group, dropping the filter and the out into that group, and then adding a aux, putting that before the filter, going to the actual oscillator's output over here and routing this to the aux. So now what happens is it's routing to this one and we're getting a clean signal to this filter. And now we can duplicate that again and change the filter again. So now we've got like this entire routing. We might want to go to the oscillator and just reroute that again, as well as the filter mod. And then let's change this to a low pass. And we can set this to lane 3. So here we'll want to set all of these to master just so they're not like stacking up on top of each other. So here we can actually turn the randoms off and set a macro to the cutoffs. So we got a bit more control over it like this. So the plus side about using an aux as opposed to just duplicating the oscillator is it's all relative to this first one, so we can just change the octave. And then they all change. So now we can go ahead and put a unique set of effects onto each of these layers. So I like to solo them to kind of hear exactly what's going on in that layer. Okay, so that's obviously the high pass, I think, coming through here. No, I'm wrong. It's the low pass. You can actually turn this down a bit. Okay, there we go. When you vary the cutoff slightly, you start to get this like even more vocal texture out of it. Rad. That's cool. So here, let's put on another slice EQ. We can actually just copy this guy across. So here we can do something like a frequency shifter maybe, to do some like crazy effect here on a random. But then what we can do is we can set a random as the kind of sidechain for that. So we've got control of it like in and out. So we can do like a lead. And then do like a fill at the end of the bar with that kind of like little wiggle. It sounds really cool with these kind of like vocal textures. What we can do here is, I actually want to show you something that I forgot to mention in my kind of like Faceplant updates video, which was actually a massive, massive thing, is the fact that you can now save and load shapes. So I've kind of created a bunch of ARPs. I find these are a little bit more handy than using the random, just because you can, obviously random has its place, but with this you can kind of set a melody or so some kind of like repetitive LFO. So for stuff like frequency shifters, it's pretty cool to create these kind of fills because you get a lot more of a kind of static sound every time, if that makes sense. Obviously, depending on how you want to create the sound, it's up to you. But I figured let me just add this feature. Okay, I actually want to turn it to unipolar. And then let's set this sidechain again here. So I want to put in a lead here, or at least a MIDI that I've created. Okay, so I want to show you guys the MIDI, so you can copy this if you want. So here it's actually got a part where this, I wrote it so that the notes can glide. So what we can do is we can actually jump into this and change this glide a little bit. Yeah, and you can go mad with the cross modulation here, kind of just modulating any of these outputs to any of these inputs and experiment and create these kind of like varieties and textures. And one thing that's really cool, the ability to, you know, sidechain each of these kind of modulations that you create and just make it into a macro. So let's do that. Let's do that. So once you've kind of found the sweet spot there, just, you know, sidechain it to a macro, and then you sweep from 0 in kind of thing. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. A big thanks to IDM Mag, proud supporters of the dance music scene and my channel. I'm going to be posting the presets that I made onto my Patreon for all my $5 supporters. So if you want to know what that's all about, check out the link that's going to be in the description. Yeah, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time.